I am disgusted to report today that Britain's political prisoner Lucy Connelly, the grieving mother locked up for 31 months for a singular X post later deleted on the day of the triggering Southport massacre, has been attacked behind bars by the prison staff who are meant to be protecting her. They intend to not only continue the persecution...
Manhandled her, arms behind the back, very tight handcuffs indeed, and literally dragged her in that position, what they call where you're sort of bent double, you're bent over, dragged her up 3 flights of stairs to this new wing, and for a few days she was essentially put in sort of a version of solitary confinement, and the whole thing completely inexplicable, very shocking for her, and totally different to the experience she'd had before.
Starved, handcuffed, not given lunch or dinner, no food.
Is freedom of speech dead in this country?
I'm not across the details of the particular case, but let me give you the principles that I would apply. Firstly, I'm strongly in favour of free speech. We've had free speech in this country for a very, very long time, and we protect it fiercely. I'm equally, though, against incitement to violence against other people. That has long been an offence in our country, and rightly so. And so I say, don't know the details of this case, but free speech, yes. Incitement to violence, no.
Britain is facing a political firestorm, and at its heart is Lucy Connelly, a mother handed a 31-month prison sentence over a single social media post written in the wake of the Southport murders, where 3 young girls lost their lives. That post, deleted within hours, was penned in anger during a period of personal grief. Yet it has cost her nearly 3 years of freedom. Lucy, the wife of a Conservative councillor, is now separated from her young child, her husband, and her wider family. For critics, the punishment is far beyond proportion, especially in a country where individuals accused of openly inciting real violence often walk free. The contrast is striking, and it is fueling a national debate over the direction of Britain's justice system.
Lucy, but terrify her. I can reveal today that Lucy Connelly has been warned about staying silent upon her release. And last Thursday, she was subjected to the most disgusting treatment behind bars at HMP Peterborough, where she was told unexpectedly that she would have to move to a different wing, into a dirty cell covered in feces, where someone had recently died. Now, this was a unit designated for the most violent prisoners in the jail. It is a unit where she is locked up for 23 hours a day. Now, Lucy, who is a gentle, a lovely soul, when she questioned this move, it was immediately interpreted as her refusing to go. And she was dealt with in an extremely forceful manner. Indeed, the attack by the prison authorities has left her.
Making matters worse, disturbing claims have surfaced from inside the prison. Allegations that she has been assaulted by staff meant to ensure her safety. For many, this case is no longer just about one woman's fate. It has become a symbol of what they see as a dangerous shift towards silencing speech that challenges the prevailing political order. And with the Prime Minister yet to break his silence, public frustration is only growing louder. Lucy Connelly's fight for freedom reached its final legal roadblock when her appeal against the 31-month sentence was dismissed by the highest court in the country. Judges ruled there were no exceptional circumstances to justify a reduced punishment, branding her post as dangerous incitement. With that decision, any hope of early release vanished, leaving her to serve the full term behind bars.
Have you found a lot of support from friends, family, from community, or has it been quite ostracising? How's it been for you?
For me personally, I can't fault people. They know me, they know this family, and they're very supportive. Even some of my fellow councillors from the opposition who are from ethnic backgrounds, they're fully supportive of me because they know me, they know my family.
The ruling hit like a shockwave. Supporters saw it as a political statement disguised as legal procedure, a clear warning that certain opinions would be punished far more harshly than others. Across Britain, conversations shifted from the details of Lucy's post to a bigger, more unsettling question. Does the country still have one justice system for all, or has it split into two? The timing of the verdict poured fuel on that fire. Just days earlier, a performer had stood on a BBC stage and made comments widely interpreted as calling for violence against Israeli soldiers. Police acknowledged the remarks, promised to review the footage, and then took no further action. To Lucy's supporters, the double standard could not have been clearer. While she sat in a cell for words written in grief and deleted within hours, others faced no consequences at all. And it was this contrast between what the law claimed to uphold and how it was actually enforced that began to turn a single court case into a national flashpoint, one now impossible for Keir Starmer to ignore.
Does the Prime Minister agree that imprisoning Lucy Connelly, a young mother with a 12-year-old daughter, for one foolish social media post, soon deleted, is clearly not an efficient or fair use of prison?
Mr. Speaker, sentencing is a matter for our courts, and I celebrate the fact that we have independent courts in this country. I am strongly in favour of free speech. We've had free speech in this country for a very long time, and we protect it fiercely. But I'm equally against incitement to violence against other people. And I will always support the action taken by our police and courts to keep our streets and people safe.
When the cameras finally turned to Keir Starmer for a response, he did not appear rattled by the growing backlash. Standing before the press, he defended the ruling as a matter of principle, insisting that freedom of speech does not mean freedom from consequences. To his allies, it was a display of firm leadership. To his critics, it was calculated theatre. A message to his base that he would decide where the boundaries of acceptable speech begin and end, no matter how uneven the enforcement looked. That stance only galvanised Lucy's supporters. A petition launched by former Reform MP Robert Lowe had been intended as a slow-burning push for debate. Instead, it exploded. Within 3 hours, it hit 10,000 signatures, forcing an official government response. By the next morning, it had surged past 100,000, guaranteeing a full parliamentary debate. The movement was not confined to Lucy's immediate circle. US commentators picked up the story, casting her as a symbol of Britain's slide towards censorship. Conservative MPs accused Starmer of overseeing a politically motivated justice system, while even some voices within Labour whispered that the optics were becoming disastrous.
I'm fine, thank you, but it's been quite an interesting day to say the least, visiting Lucy Connelly in prison, and on one sense, you know, credit where credit's due. Until last week, actually she'd been treated well, with professionalism, and really no complaints at all. By all accounts, she'd been a model prisoner. But then something changed, it seems, and despite being promised to go on to a wing where essentially with extra privileges for good behaviour, all of a sudden that was diverted. She was told she was going to a different wing with very different inmates.
For many, Lucy's case now represented something much larger. It was no longer about whether one post had crossed a legal line, but whether Britain itself was drifting into a form of selective justice, one where the consequences for speaking depend on who is speaking and whose politics they challenge. As outrage grew, the streets began to reflect the mood. Protests in support of Lucy Connelly started small, but within days they were swelling into mass gatherings. In city squares and outside Parliament, banners reading "Free Lucy" and "One Law for All" waved above crowds that ranged from a few dozen to several thousand. Footage of a massive rally in Parliament Square went viral. The chants of "Two-tier justice, Starmer must go" echoing across social media. The government's initial strategy was to ignore the protests, hoping they would fade. But images of police arresting small clusters of demonstrators while leaving politically favoured rallies untouched only strengthened the claims of selective enforcement. Opposition MPs seized on those moments in the Commons, accusing Starmer of presiding over a justice system that rewarded loyalty and punished dissent.
To the ground, manhandled her, arms behind the back, very tight handcuffs indeed, and literally dragged her in that position, what they call where you're sort of bent double, you're bent over, dragged her up 3 flights of stairs to this new wing. And for a few days, she was essentially put in sort of a version of solitary confinement. And the whole thing completely inexplicable, very shocking for her, and totally different to the experience she'd had before.
Starved, handcuffed, not given lunch or dinner, no food.
Even inside Labour, cracks began to show. A few MPs, wary of their own voters' reactions, cautiously expressed concern in interviews. The unease deepened when an audio leak surfaced from a private Labour meeting in which senior figures appeared to discuss the political advantage of standing firm on Lucy's sentence as a show of strength against extremism. The clip spread like wildfire, and while some insisted it had been taken out of context, for the public it confirmed what they had suspected all along, that Lucy's fate had become a political calculation. At that point, the Connelly case was no longer a single legal controversy. It had become a rallying point for an unlikely coalition of libertarians, free speech advocates, disillusioned voters, and even some who had never been politically active before. And every day the protests continued, the pressure on Starmer's leadership grew heavier. The Connelly case quickly crossed Britain's borders, capturing the attention of international media. American outlets, particularly conservative networks, framed it as proof of what happens when political correctness turns into state control. Commentators in Australia and across Europe echoed the sentiment, warning that Britain was setting a precedent that could be used to silence dissent anywhere.
We have a woman called Lucy Connelly who's been given a 31-month prison sentence for saying something unpleasant on social media in the wake of the horrific murders of 3 young girls in Southport. She should not be in prison, period.
Nigel Farage saw an opening and moved fast. Touring the country, he branded Lucy as a political prisoner and rallied supporters under the banner of free speech. His message was simple and sharp. If the government could jail her for a single online post, they could do the same to anyone. That line became a chant at rallies, a headline in sympathetic papers, and a rallying cry across social media. Reform UK, once dismissed as a fringe player, began enjoying a noticeable bump in the polls, especially in constituencies where voters felt Labour had grown out of touch. For Starmer, who had been banking on a divided opposition to secure the next election, it was a warning sign that could not be ignored. Inside Westminster, the political mood was shifting. Conservative MPs hammered the Prime Minister at every opportunity, while Reform candidates used the case to build momentum ahead of upcoming contests. Even some Labour loyalists began to quietly admit that the government's handling of the affair was politically toxic. But Starmer, still convinced that standing firm was the only way to maintain authority, refused to back down, locking himself into a fight he could no longer easily control.
Pretty crazy that we're even asking the question over whether she should be in prison or not, as I don't think she should be at all.
Why?
Because it's just a tweet. It's just somebody's thought.
It's not just
in
a
the
tweet,
spur
though,
of the
is it?
moment.
I just robbed the shop. I just robbed it. It's just a shop robbing. It's just a straightforward shop robber. Come on, John.
Yeah, I get your point, but I'm just saying
By the second month of Lucy Connelly's imprisonment, the protests had grown into a constant presence outside Parliament and across major cities. Demonstrators rotated in shifts to keep the pressure on, braving rain, wind and cold to make sure their chants were heard. Placards carried her face alongside slogans like "End political prosecutions" and "One law for all," while live streams of the rallies reached hundreds of thousands online. For Starmer, the relentless public attention was becoming impossible to sidestep. Every press conference, every television interview, every walk to the Commons chamber was hijacked by questions about Lucy's case. Journalists stopped sticking to pre-approved topics, demanding answers on why she remained behind bars, while others who incited real violence walked free. The Prime Minister's famously calm demeanour began to slip. In one tense exchange outside Number 10, a reporter mentioned Nigel Farage's latest attack on him. Starmer's jaw tightened, and his reply came out clipped and sharp. "We are not in the business of bending justice to the will of populists." He turned on his heel and walked away. The footage aired on a loop across news networks, framed as evidence that the pressure was finally getting to him. Inside Labour, party unity was fraying. A handful of MPs broke ranks entirely, calling the sentence disproportionate and damaging to public trust. That dissent gave the opposition more ammunition, fueling the narrative that Starmer was leading a government willing to twist the justice system for political ends. Outside the bubble of Westminster, ordinary voters, even those who disliked Lucy's original post, increasingly agreed on one thing: the punishment did not fit the crime. The crisis deepened when a leaked chain of internal Labour emails hit the tabloids. The messages, reportedly between senior advisers, appeared to show discussions about using the Connelly case to reinforce the party's stance on hate speech while framing critics as extremists. One line, "Public outrage will fade," became the flashpoint. For many, it was the proof they had been waiting for. Lucy's imprisonment was not just a legal matter, but a calculated political maneuver. The reaction was immediate and furious. The leak spread across social media within hours, amplified by influencers, journalists and political rivals. Public trust in the government, already fragile, took another hit. Demonstrations surged in size, with tens of thousands marching through central London in one of the largest rallies the capital had seen in years. Placards mixed calls for Lucy's release, with broader demands to reform hate speech laws, making it clear that this was now a fight over the principle of free expression itself. Nigel Farage, flanked by high-profile supporters, took the stage at Parliament Square and declared that the government would fall before Lucy Connelly bent. The crowd erupted, the footage playing live on multiple news networks and sending shockwaves through Westminster. Inside Number 10, Starmer's closest advisers urged him to offer at least a symbolic concession, perhaps a review of sentencing guidelines or a statement acknowledging public concerns. But Starmer refused, insisting that yielding even slightly would look like weakness and undermine his authority. That decision only cemented the public perception that he was digging in, not out of principle, but to protect his political image. Lucy Connelly's name had now travelled far beyond Britain's borders. Appearing in headlines from New York to Sydney, international commentators framed her as a symbol of the fight against state overreach, warning that the British government's stance risked setting a precedent other democracies might follow. Social media carried her image alongside hashtags calling for global solidarity, and free speech groups abroad began issuing statements in her defence. At home, the petition for her release surged past 250,000 signatures, locking in a parliamentary debate. The scale of the public response forced both supporters and opponents of the ruling to prepare for a confrontation that could shape Britain's approach to speech laws for years. Outside Parliament, protests swelled to record numbers, with demonstrators camping overnight and holding coordinated rallies in multiple cities. Starmer's team tried to shift attention with new policy announcements, but every press conference circled back to Lucy. Leaks, viral protest footage, and relentless commentary meant the case dominated the news cycle. For the public, it had become more than one woman's fate. It was a litmus test for whether the justice system applied the law equally, regardless of political affiliation. Inside Labour, unease grew louder, as some MPs privately warned that Starmer's refusal to bend was costing the party support in crucial swing seats. When the parliamentary debate finally arrived, the tension inside Westminster was palpable. On one side, Starmer's allies framed the case as a matter of protecting the public from dangerous speech, warning that loosening the laws would embolden extremists. On the other, opposition MPs hammered the government with the language of liberty, fairness and equality under the law. They pointed to Lucy's sentence as the ultimate example of a system that punished based on political convenience rather than principle. Outside, thousands gathered to watch the proceedings on giant screens, their chants drifting into the chamber through open windows. "One law for all" echoed down the streets, a sound that underscored just how deeply the issue had gripped the nation. Nigel Farage seized the moment, using media interviews to position himself as the voice of those who felt silenced, and warning that if Lucy could be jailed for a post, ordinary Britons could be next. By the time the debate ended, no immediate policy change had been announced, but the damage to the government's image was undeniable. Polls showed public trust in the justice system at one of its lowest points in decades, and Starmer's approval ratings had taken a sharp hit. The opposition was energised. Labour's unity was cracked, and Lucy's name had become shorthand for a deeper anxiety about the country's direction. Whether she served her full sentence or was released early, the Connelly affair had already altered Britain's political landscape. For many, it marked a moment when the nation had to decide whether free speech was still a core value or a privilege handed out selectively. And that decision, once made, would shape not just the rest of Starmer's premiership, but the future of British democracy itself. If you enjoyed this breakdown, please like and subscribe to the channel for more updates on this